Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Free Trader Box Set, Books 1 to 3, by Craig Martelle, narrated by Gabriel Vaughan. Free Trader of War and Deep, Free Trader Book 1. 1. Ass. Ass! You are such an ass! Braden lay by the fire in the blanket he'd been using since he was a child. The young man's long braid was wrapped around his neck like a scarf. He looked at the hill cat, a scowl darkening his face. "It makes noises, but no sense," the cat responded over their mind link. The cat's orange back, even with a man's knee, had black dots and a black slash toward his tail. He was called a hellcat by those who'd seen him make a kill, but not by Braden, his most loyal friend. When he was a child, Braden saved a hillcat kitten from drowning. At that moment, they bonded, and instantly, Braden knew he had a lifelong partner. Many called the joining the ultimate pairing of friendship and joy. It hadn't taken long before Braden's bond with the cat felt like the relationship his parents had. Together their entire adult lives, annoyance, bickering, surrender, friendship, then more bickering, and intertwined throughout was a fierce loyalty. The old man would say anything about his partner, but if anyone else said something, the fight was on. Braden called the cat an ass 10 times a turn of the sun, but they fought their enemies together. They were there for each other. And so it was, the relationship between a hill cat, called Golden Warrior of the Stone Cliffs, or simply G-War, as Braden called him. The hill cat had his own name, but even after 10 cycles of the seasons, he hadn't told Braden what it was. He insisted that Braden wasn't mature enough to know his true cat name. As Braden glared at the cat, G-War raised one paw in his mocking way of giving Braden the finger. The cat turned around a couple times, sniffing the air, then faced away from the young man and dropped to the ground. G-War's head was up, sphinx-like, his eyes closed. The cat cut their link. The cat listened in on Braden's thoughts, but Braden only heard what the cat wanted him to hear. "I hate it when you do that," Braden retorted, but knew that he could sleep now, without fear of surprise, as he did every night when the cat watched over him. Without G-War, Braden would have never survived his life as a free trader in War and Deep. 2. Binghamton. Braden always stopped where he could take a look, see how things were before he entered a community. Binghamton was hit or miss. Sometimes it was the best place to trade. Other times, it was a great place to avoid. Braden nudged his team of 2 water buffalo to a halt. He climbed down from the buckboard and walked to a small rise on the side of the road. He crawled the final few feet, not wanting to highlight himself. He took out his telescope, a gift from his father. Nothing more than rough hide rolled with polished glass set at both ends, and scanned the road in front of him. He stopped at the collection of buildings that made up Binghamton. He looked from one to the other, not seeing any activity aside from the market square. In the central square where the traders conducted their business, people gathered. Braden didn't see any traders or their stalls. Everyone watched what looked to be a lynching. One person, probably a man, stood on a block of wood under a makeshift tripod, his hands behind him. Braden thought he could make out a rope tied to the man's neck. "Hey, come over here," Braden said to G-War. "So my name is Hay? Is it giving me a new name?" Braden was never surprised how the cat fixated on the trivial when Braden was serious. He set himself up for it every time. "Could you please come over here and take a look at this? I would like to know what you think." Braden's voice was laced with sarcasm. He even bowed slightly, as much as he could from his position on the ground. The cat padded lightly from under the wagon. He had been enjoying the shade. He stopped halfway there and squatted. Braden wrinkled his nose. He would never get used to the smell of cat pee. If that's what it wanted, why didn't it just say so in the first place? It knows how I love to say yes to its distractions. Ass, Braden said under his breath. He knew the cat heard him. It heard everything. It saw everything. G-War pinned his ears against his head as he crouched and looked over the rise. He soon changed his position to sitting, with his ears up. He was longer than a man's arm, not counting his tail, and had a slightly oversized head, necessary to hold a large mouth of spiked teeth and 2 sharp fangs. People not paired had an innate fear of hill cats. Braden always warned potential customers to keep their dogs inside. G-War had a tendency to go after them if they barked at him. For anyone who saw a hill cat make a kill, they would never forget the ferocity of it. So the humans are killing another human. What of it? But why? Braden asked, expecting the cat to have an opinion. He cheated them, or so they think. Did he? Braden knew that the cat could touch other minds on occasion, especially when a person was distraught. It made sense that the man's thoughts were coming through loud and clear. No. With that, G-War took a particular interest in licking his paw, then using it to groom the fur around one ear. That's it? No? He asked, hoping for more. No answer. Do you think we should go down there? G-War stopped his grooming, looked back at the town briefly, and then turned to pad back to the wagon. No. He didn't think so either. If Binghamton took to killing traders for a simple case of mistaken cheating, then he wanted no part of it. Braden would miss trading with them, though. Binghamton made for a nice waypoint. There was always something they needed and something they had that could be traded elsewhere at a nice profit. Oh well. Braden took one last look through his telescope. Let's get out of here. Braden turned his team around, facing them away from Binghamton before he climbed aboard. What he saw bothered him. Not death. He'd seen plenty of that, probably too much in his 20 cycles on the planet. What bothered him was how a town could unite against a trader. When he passed that word, no other traders would go there. Traders were the lifelink between the communities of Warren Deep. Binghamton just cut itself off from the rest of humanity. 3. Detour. Braden backtracked his team, then headed south on what looked to be little more than a game trail. It would take time and be slow going, but he knew it led them where he wanted to go. He grew up on the roads with his trader parents, where they showed him the ways around Warren Deep. They never allowed themselves only one way in. They never knew when they would need to avoid an area or just disappear. Braden's water buffalo would never help him make a quick escape. His parents had used horses, but he couldn't afford those. Not yet, anyway. He counted on G-War's senses to help them avoid trouble. And if all of that failed, he counted on the magical bow beneath the seat of the wagon. It wasn't really magic. It was a relic of the past. It was a relic of the past made in the before time. It was the Rico bow. Its like would never be made again. The bow was a black that seemed to absorb the light. It had a second curve at the top and bottom that helped guide the string, magnifying the power of the pull. He had seen a couple other bows like this one, but the others were modern-made of fine yew and much longer. Very few people had the strength and size to wield one properly. Braden was not a tall man, so he could never use a full-sized longbow. His Rico bow, though, gave him a significant advantage over others in Warren Deep. No adversary could get close to him. And that was the last thing he wanted. He preferred to be with his cat, trade for a profit, and enjoy each town's unique offerings. He liked to have a woman in each town. Many he happily paid for a few hours of their time. He was not yet ready to take a mate, for he was not wealthy enough to treat her properly. Braden pulled out the bow as the wagon bounced along the trail. He heard G-War express his discontent with a low-throated growl as he scrabbled to regain his position on a small desk inside. "Stop. There are a couple rabbits that require my attention." With that, G-War was out the back and in a silent flash of orange disappeared into the trees alongside the trail. "I guess we're stopping," Braden said as he pulled back on the reins. Rabbit sounded good. He took out 2 of his precious hardwood arrows and jumped down, looking in the direction G-War had gone. When they hunted together, a kill was almost always guaranteed. Most of the time, that meant Braden drove prey toward a waiting cat that would strike from nowhere, going straight for an exposed throat. Using claws and teeth, the cat made quick work of wild game. G-War avoided protracted fights or posturing. He said that was for mating rituals, not eating. When killing for food, quickest was best. When killing to survive, then kills needed to be even quicker. Once in the woods, Braden stalked quietly, earning a harsh rebuke from the cat. Braden's idea of quiet was far different than that of a hill cat. He stopped moving and watched. He couldn't see where G-War was, but he could feel him close by. The cat had taught him to use all his senses. Braden sniffed the air. High country pines, musty undergrowth. He closed his eyes and listened. A branch moving, tree bark disturbed. He looked toward the sound, squinting his eyes. About 30 strides away, a squirrel stopped running down a tree, motionless, head raised. Braden nocked an arrow, slowly took aim, and pulled back. He sighted in on the squirrel, then raised the point of the arrow slightly to account for the distance. He let go the bowstring. With a muffled twang, the arrow split the air, driving through the squirrel's neck. The body went limp, falling to the side, hanging where the arrow pinned it to the tree. A heartbeat later, the high-pitched scream of a rabbit pierced the forest calm. It was instantly silenced. A second animal ran wildly through the leaves of the undergrowth as G-War closed the distance. Rabbits will bolt, zigzag, run some more, then stop. G-War didn't try to overtake the rabbit. He only wanted to be within striking distance when it paused. This rabbit had a little more spunk than most. Possibly the smell of fresh blood and the size of the creature chasing it added fuel to its fire. But in the end, it hesitated, and the cat did not. G-War collected both of his kills and headed back toward the wagon. "Oh, you're sharing with me? What a good kitty." G-War hesitated for a second and then continued toward the wagon. The cat didn't waste time answering his ridiculous human. He wondered if all cats had bipeds that were so inane. If only he had never fallen into that river. But alas, he was a kitten, young and unwise in the way of the world. He could have done worse, though. What if his human couldn't hunt for itself? What if his human was a farmer? How inglorious would that have been? Braden carefully removed his arrow from the squirrel and carried the kill to the edge of the woods. He used his trusty skinning knife to make short work of it. He used a notch in the tree to help him remove the fur. Squirrel hide is extremely tough. You have to wedge the tail into something and then pull for all you're worth. Once finished, it would make for a nice meal. With 2 rabbits, he figured G-War would have something left over. He watched the cat tear into them. G-War had a particular affinity for the entrails. Braden didn't mind, as that meant there would be meat available for roasting. He built a fire with a spit and put the squirrel on it. He checked back to see that the cat had finished and was now cleaning himself. "Do you mind?" No answer. One carcass was almost completely intact. Braden made quick work of cleaning it and put it on the spit behind the squirrel. On a full stomach, the world always looked like a better place. He heard a floorboard in the wagon creak as G-War jumped in, probably to curl up under the desk for a nap. The wagon was mostly enclosed, on the sides by boarding and on the top by a rough canvas cover, greased to keep the rain from getting through. It was home. He could sleep inside the wagon when they weren't carrying a full load, or sleep outside, depending on the weather. The world was his oyster, or so his parents had told him, before they went to the great beyond. He wasn't sure what an oyster was, but his mom made it sound wonderful. The bow was a gift from his dad. His dad never shared where he had gotten it, even though he hounded him about it until his death. Braden didn't like unanswered questions. Like Binghamton. What happened there? Braden wanted knowledge. He also wanted wealth. He wasn't afraid to take risks to achieve either. It came to him clearly as he held his Rico bow. He needed to find old tech. His routine trade route wouldn't get him what he wanted. He needed to step outside of the norm, maybe even leave his wagon behind. A trader without a caravan. That would make him unique. Maybe even poor and quite possibly dead. But he would be the envy of the other traders. No one traded solely in old tech. There are people who spent their entire lives trading and never handled a piece of old tech. It had to be out there. Time to dig out the maps and recall the campfire tales. He knew that hill cats passed knowledge down the generations. Braden wondered if G-War knew anything. Then, what would it take for G-War to share what he knew? 4. A new goal. Braden laid 2 maps on his desk. They were the only maps he owned, but they weren't the best resource he had for the geography of Warren Deep. He had his rudder, handed down to him by his parents. A rudder was how sailors documented their navigation of the seas. They protected the rudder more than the treasures they carried, for the rudder was the navigator's key to his existence. And Braden had one for the trade routes. It was rough-pressed thick paper, the best that could be had in Warren Deep, and he meticulously kept it up to date. He made the latest entry regarding Binghamton in small script as a side note to the page dedicated to this area. He added a couple lines to his family's some knowledge of the town of Binghamton. If they followed the current trail, he would end up at the main road between Binghamton and Cameron. He could then continue east to Cameron. From there, he had 3 choices. His finger traced the routes on the hand-drawn map. Which route would take him closest to an area that was open, yet unknown? G-War smoothly jumped to the desk from the floor of the wagon. He looked at the map, appearing to study it, then sat down in the middle of it. He immediately curled his paw toward his face, exposing his claws, where he started to nibble and pull on them. Every now and then, the claws needed to have old growth removed, leaving only the sharpest and smoothest points. Really? You need to do that right here? These weren't questions. They rarely were. The cat did as he pleased. Much of it seemed calculated to make the most mischief for Braden. Braden poked the cat in the side, pulling his hand away quickly. Then he pointed his finger and slowly moved toward G-War's side again. The cat fixed his unblinking glare on the finger, raising his paw, claws out, ready to strike. Braden wisely stopped. You wouldn't. Again, not a question. Braden had razor-thin scars on both arms and legs from where he was on the losing end of play fighting with the cat. He was told that he had rather nasty scars down his back. He told people this was from a mutie that jumped him, but didn't have to brag about it. That wasn't true. It was from a play fight where G-War ended up in a tree and pounced on him. Braden had turned just enough to keep the cat from landing on his face, and the cat scored his claws down Braden's back. That was the only time the cat had been apologetic. Probably more for being unable to control his jump than for clawing his human's back. It wouldn't have been a problem if it had more fur on its back, like any respectable animal, G-War thought. Braden changed the trajectory of his hand so that he ruffled the fur around G-War's neck, scratching a couple places he knew the cat liked. The cat opened the mind link. Oh, right there. Yeah, that feels good. Don't stop. Okay, stop now. To punctuate this, G-War slapped Braden's hand with a paw, claws retracted. Braden smiled and laughed. He knew the game. Petting G-War was therapeutic for both of them, as physical contact between them kept the bond strong. The power of the bond was not in owning the other, but in their commitment. Neither could be described as clingy. Braden was friendly, the cat aloof. Neither could depart this friendship no matter the circumstances. Neither wanted to. Even after the cat injured Braden, that same cat comforted him, even finding numbweed for the human's wounds. Unprocessed numbweed could only be made potent by chewing it. The cat complained about the taste and that it made his mouth feel funny. The cat also contended that Braden owed him for finding, chewing, and applying the numbweed. Old tech, my friend. To make our fortune, we need to find a source of old tech. Imagine if we could bring a wagon load back to Jefferson City itself. Braden imagined himself at the head of a parade, being rewarded with money, power, women, maybe even a seat on the council. What do you think, G? I think that I don't like being bored for the few hours a turn I am awake. I don't like being hungry. I really don't like the rain, because that leads to the thing I detest the most, being wet. The cat locked eyes with Braden, then blinked, slowly. Whatever. Wake me when we get there. He got ready to jump off the desk. Wait, do the Hillcats know if the ancients had any hidden outposts, and where they might be? Yes. The cat jumped down and wriggled past Braden's feet to wedge himself under the desk. Thanks. Now tell me which way we need to go. Fine. South. South of the hills, through the trees, across the desert, along the coast, and back into a forest. It is close to there, maybe 30 turns away. The cat curled up as he closed the mind link. But Warren Deep ends in the desert, which we can't cross. It's too far. Braden thought for a minute. It's too far. 5. A new plan. Everything else forgotten, Braden focused on what it would take to overcome the obstacles in reaching an old-tech outpost. First, they had to cross a desert. How could they carry enough water and food to make the crossing possible? As he thought about it, that was the only real obstacle he saw. If they reached the other side and there was water, he could fish, and the buffalo could graze. If there was a forest, they could hunt. Crossing the desert. Water, food, speed. He had time to think. It was another 2 turns to reach Cameron, then 4 turns south to reach Whitehorse, the last town before the Great Desert. He would fill up on water and information, then take the plunge. He was in great spirits, riding high on the buckboard as the water buffalo ambled mindlessly forward. He needed to make a successful trade in Cameron, but he had always done well there. It was a crossroads between the east-west and the main north-south trade routes. They had a high turnover, which meant they always needed goods. Braden had boxes of the finest flint arrowheads, some so small they could be used in a blowgun to pierce the eye of a pigeon. He also carried bolts of rough cloth, a few tortoise shells shaped as breastplates for protection, and the smallest of his load, but with the most potential for gain, he carried 5 vials of the spice saffromander. Saffromander was coveted by the wealthy to season any dish. It was produced in only 2 places, one of which Braden had passed through half a moon back. He traded a complete load of swords and knives, but knew it was well worth it. The weapons had been scavenged from a small battle between 2 neighboring communities in the western high tree forests. Braden hadn't done the scavenging, but he made the trade, then put as much distance between him and the battlefield as he could. The trade of the weapons for saffromander had been a lucky one. Regardless, it would help to make his name in the business. Braden was a free trader. That meant he was not a member of the Caravan Guild. His parents had been members for a while, but they didn't frequent the Jefferson City area. They had little interaction with the Guild, and most importantly, the Guild could not provide them with protection, a main reason to pay the tithes. Guild trades protected both sellers and buyers. Guild prices guaranteed a certain quality. Braden would meet guild traders, for he was one of their suppliers. This was how the system worked best. Free traders took more risk, but earned all the value of their trade. The guild traders paid the tithe, but risked far less. They knew what they would make from a trade. They knew that the trade was guaranteed. They lived boring lives of routine and comfort. That wasn't for Braden, although the hill cat often made comments about wanting more servants. 6. Cameron. Braden rolled slowly into Cameron, a smile on his face as he thought of Ava. She was a friendly schoolteacher. He had not yet been successful in sharing more than a meal and a drink, but maybe this trip he would see more of her. He smiled broadly at that. G-War departed the wagon in a flash. Braden could never shut out the sexual antics of the cat. G-War took it as his personal mission to never let a female domestic cat in heat go unserviced. He shared of himself as far and wide as possible. It was a bit disturbing for Braden. The cat was so sedate until females were around, then he became a one-cat dynamo. It could be an immense and intense distraction. This also left Braden most vulnerable, for the cat provided a distinct edge when negotiating. G-War could feel when someone was rejoicing in the terms of the trade, and this helped Braden to get a little more. He wanted people satisfied with their trades, not ecstatic at how they had out-bargained the free trader. Braden continued driving his team to the market square. Every town had one where the traders could set up their wagons, where local vendors plied local products, and where buyers came to buy. Stables were located near the markets so the beasts pulling the carts could be readily tended to. For a fee, of course. It was the law of the trade. As Braden unhooked the water buffalo, a couple of local vendors asked what he brought. He politely declined, waiting until he had more people around. Not having competing offers often led to getting a lower price, a less lucrative trade. Although Braden was young, he was no fool. As he was delivering his 2 stalwart buffalo to the stable, he was inundated with flashing images of a long-haired calico, the target of G-War's affections. Then a small gray cat entered the picture, another suitor, judging by how quickly G-War drove it away. The stable master took Braden's delay as a counter to his offer. The prices were standard, so it wasn't a tactic, although the man lowered his fee to a single silver piece for both animals. Braden realized what the man was saying as the cat reached his post-affections purr. "That's a great deal, and thank you. I'll throw in 5 arrowheads for your kindness." Free traders needed to maintain good relations. No trade this turn was worth losing next turn's deal. Traders who ripped people off went out of business very quickly. By out of business, he meant they were killed, like the man who had mistakenly perished in Binghamton. The stable master seemed nervous, but pleased with Braden's addition to the agreed trade. Braden returned to his wagon, thinking that he would talk with the stable master later. He wanted to figure out what was amiss. He loved answers, not so much the questions. 7. Upset the trade. Once his wagon was prepared for the trade, he stood on the buckboard and howled in his trader voice, come ye, see treasures from distant lands available for trade at prices so low you'll be amazed. Cloth and arrowheads, breastplates and more. Are you safe? You will find peace of mind here. Come ye. It didn't take long before a small crowd surrounded his wagon, asking to see the wares. He pulled his items out, one by one. The cloth, each tortoise shell, a few arrowheads, and finally, when the haggling over these items tapered off, he stood back on his buckboard. Safframander, who has tasted this magical spice? You will never go back to average fare. Do I have an offer for 1 vial of the best safframander available? He had been in town long enough to know that this was the only saffromander available, so his statement wasn't untrue. He didn't know how it...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?